Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on how to buy a property in Italy. This is the second in a Place in the Sun's two masterclasses on Italy. If you happen to miss the one yesterday, which looked at sort of which location to choose, you can find a link to that on our website. This session, we have the same experts, but we're looking at sort of how to find a property, how to look for one, how to find an agent, how to buy it, how to complete, and then moving full time, the issues of residency, etc. So if you've got any questions, do ping them over in the Q&A slot. And we'll try to get through them. And you'll also have the opportunity to book sessions with my two panelists individually afterwards. So my name's Liz Rowlinson, property journalist for Place in the Sun and other places. And I travel usually covering on international property. I'd like to introduce my panelists who have lots of experience in the Italian market. Stefano Lucatello.
Hi Liz, hello everyone. My name is Stefano Lucatello. I'm senior partner of an international property law firm called Cobalt Law LLP. We're based in Chelsea and we act for clients who buy abroad in many countries, including Italy. We're all bilingual at least, and all by at least qualified in two jurisdictions, and we look after you from the beginning to the end and avoid you having to go to Italy if necessary by using powers of attorney. So we can do the whole process from the beginning to end without you actually having to go to Italy at all. So that's what we do.
Although we all do want to go to Italy, and we can actually go to Italy at the moment, which is a great thing. And I know quite a few people going off there this week. But you're actually based there, aren't you? This is Nathania van Beem.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Nathania van Beem. We have a company that is called Abruzzo Casa Italy because we are based in the Abruzzo area, but we are expanding to Italy, to the whole Italy, so it's called Italian Property International. So both, one is covering Italy and one is covering Abruzzo. And we help people from abroad to buy houses, to find houses, the house hunting, but also to do all the checks with the house when you found something that is really interesting, including the constructional part, things like that. And then afterwards, we can also help with the renovations, all in English, of course. So that's what we do.
Brilliant. And it's fair to say that generally British buyers in Italy, as in a lot of other countries, they need a lot of help because it's not like buying in your local neighbourhood and you know the language, you know the streets, etc. It's a lot more involved, and key to that is finding well, a good lawyer, but also a good agent to help you in that process. And the truth is, a lot of areas of Italy are, you know, there are a lot of areas where there aren't a lot of people dealing with the UK market necessarily. But so how do you find how do you find a good local agent, Nathania, and sort of, you know, what can they, you've alluded to it briefly, but what are all the different things they need to do for you?
Well, we also have our own property, so I also do collaborations with other agencies, but I'm also part of a group of agencies through whole of Italy. So there is a collaboration. So for me, it's always more interesting to know what people are looking for. So then we can propose certain things, and we can look together with the clients, and that is the more. Yeah, that is the more focused process. About the collaboration, I think we also come to that later on. In Italy, it is so when an agent has a house into sale and you contact the agent directly as a client, from that moment on, you are a client of the selling agency. And that means the selling agency has the right to also charge you the buying provision. But it is not always said, I cannot say that it's not true, but it is not always the case that agency is also looking after your interests. So I always advise to find an agent that is reliable, that you feel good with, who can take care of your interest when you're buying a house. That agent can contact a selling agent, and then they can make an agreement together, and then you only have to pay the agent that is working for you. So that's a very important thing, actually.
Okay.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very important. It's very important having someone that's going to look after your interests, and this is where we come on to the role of the agent, but also the lawyer. And in Italy, there's a notarized system. So, Stefano, can you explain the different roles of the notary and the lawyer, if you indeed use a lawyer?
Right. Whereas in England, we'd have two solicitors, one at each end. We talk to each other, we exchange contracts, we complete the transaction. We don't need to see each other because we do everything telematically. In any country which is a civil law jurisdiction, which is basically where the Roman law code or Napoleonic code exists, then you have a notarial system. You have a notaio in Italy. He is not the same as a notary public in the United Kingdom, completely different. He is an impartial representative of the government. He's there for two tasks, basically to see that the vendor and the purchaser are who they are. Three tasks really: to make sure the money that is being paid across is paid across correctly, and thirdly, to see that any taxation that's due by the buyer and also sometimes capital gains tax on the seller is paid and is accounted for to the government. So he has a neutral position. He is not there to tell you what's right and what's wrong, although he has an obligation because being representative of the state, he has to give good title to the person buying. He has to have his own searches, so he will do searches for bankruptcy. He will repeat searches on the title the day or so before completion, and he will make sure that there are no outstanding debts. The most important thing: no outstanding debts and no other registrations against the title. The problem with that is that abroad, if there is a debt outstanding and it's not spotted, you will take that debt on board as the buyer. If that occurs, then the notario has been negligent, and you can sue the notario. I've had that once or twice where they've missed something. So he is there not to say to you, be careful of this, be careful of that. He is there to read out the rogito, the document at the end of the atto, which is the conveyance. And if you don't understand Italian, he won't complete the transaction. So you need to have someone who translates and interprets for you. There are more and more notai and notaires or notarios, depending which country in Europe, who now speak English, and they are happy to speak English to you. But for the most part, it's still the old system. You don't understand the language, you won't start the final deed, the stesura, which is the reading through the 20-odd pages to tell you what's what, because he then would be negligent if you didn't understand something. You could go back to him and say, I'm sorry, but I didn't understand this, and it's your fault. You should have explained it better to me. So that's the situation. You don't have the situation of avvocato. You don't instruct an avvocato in Italy to do the job. We are different in the sense that, as I was saying yesterday, because we're in a common law jurisdiction, we act predominantly for people who come from common law countries, Australia, Italy, Australia, England, whatever. If we weren't a common law country, i.e. where common law applies, we wouldn't exist as a job, because we'd be a civil law jurisdiction, and as such, people wouldn't do it. So we are different in that English people like to have their hands held, and we go through the whole procedure as we would do an English house purchase, following various connections. It's not the same procedure by far, but along the same route, to make sure that people understand where they are, what they need to do, how they need to do it, and when they need to do it, basically. So we go from A to B all the way down to the end, and we have associate practices that we work with in all these countries, and our own Italian, French, Spanish lawyers in the team as well in our offices in London.
Thanks. And actually, a question that came up in the last round of Italian webinars was, who appoints the notary in the process?
Well, it is the case that you can each have your own separate notary if you want to, but usually the appointing process it's sort of de facto. I always say to clients, unless there's something particularly wrong with the notaire or the notaio, go to the notaio that dealt with the people who are selling to you now. Why? Because he or she will know the outlay of the property, will know the property itself, and also because they act as repository for title deeds. Although there is the land registry, once you sign the document, the rogito, you will never see the original again, because he will keep that document, and you will only see a copy of it with his stamp on it, which you may need to use for registration purposes, for Residency purposes, and any other. So it's not like in England where you see the document again. You will never see that again. So that's the other reason for going to him, because he will have in his archivi, in his archives, he will have the old document which either he or a colleague dealt with many years ago, and therefore he can refer to it.
Thank you. And a question we've got here, which actually we need to cover anyway. It's Jill Itkin asks, what taxes are involved in buying a property in Italy? Natanya, can you answer that?
Yes, of course. It depends if you buy your house as a holiday home or if you buy your house as a residential home. And that means you need to stay here for at least 6 months a year, and you need the inscription in the commune, in the city hall, that you are basically you're based in Italy then. When you buy your house as a permanent home, you need to pay 2% of the value of the house, the buying price. That's not completely true, but to calculate, we do it like this: 2% for the taxes. And if you buy your house as a holiday home, you should consider with 9%. But the notary always makes a check: what is the buying price and what is the official price? And I always ask the notary to do the taxes on the official price, and that is also the minimum price a property has to be worth in terms of taxation. So that is the minimum tax you need to pay, and that is a calculation to be done. But
so that's you pay less on a primo casa as opposed to a secondi.
Yes, absolutely.
Home. And so overall, you say a buyer comes to your office, Natanya, and you say budget sort of how if they're buying a holiday home, you will say budget for what 10%, what in total should cover everything.
Yeah, normally with 12-13% it should be okay, because the taxation cost will be a little bit lower, and then of course you have the cost of the notary, but it depends on the price of the house that you're looking for. But to be safe, when you calculate with 14%, you have a good idea, a rough idea. But for people who are interested, we always make a kind of calculation that you know what you can expect, things like that.
Great. Okay. And Stefano, what little tips might you have for buyers to sort of be aware of, or to make the process go more smoothly in terms of things that it would really helpful that they know if they start looking for a property?
Well, the first thing you must do, I always say to clients, whether you're buying now or in the future, and certainly if you're buying in the future, is if you go to Italy, or certainly before COVID, if you go to Italy, go for a codice fiscale and open a bank account. The codice fiscale is now a little bit more difficult and laborious because of the closure of the offices, the reopening again in October, but it is possible in some ways still to get the codice fiscale. That's the tax code number. It's an alphanumeric tax code that will stay with you for the rest of your life. You can't complete any transaction on a business footing in Italy without the codice fiscale. It's also helpful for you to have that when you open the bank account. I mean, if you go to people like Natanya, I always say to people, don't use me. I can do it from England, but it's much more laborious. Go to people like Natanya, and the local agent that you're going to in the area, she will have, or he will have, a contact with a bank. They will have good relations with a bank. They'll take you into a bank and they'll do everything for you. In fact, Natanya probably also does the codice fiscale as well. Yeah. And if you're over there, do it. The other thing is, make sure that you go to an estate agent that's registered in Italy. They have to be registered, have to be licensed. If you're not registered, it's a criminal offence, both for the agent and also for you if you take advice and assistance and buy from that person. The other thing is, if you do buy from someone who's not licensed, you're not obliged to pay them the commission. Of course, they're not entitled to their commission. Whereas in England, we don't have to license people. In Italy, France, they are licensed, and it's important. So make sure you do that. In Italy, also, they have what's it called, the MLS system, which is the
Listing,
listing system. Thank you. And so of course you could see the same property with Nathania, but you could see it with somebody else. It may not be that they have the same price on the same property. So have a look at that. And I would always advise, go and see the property. For God's sake, don't buy it on the internet. Go there and kick it. And if it hurts your foot, it means it's there. So many scams exist on the internet that, I'd hate to tell you what goes on, but you must go across there and you must see the property. And then get yourself someone, like Nathania, who speaks English, because most English people, bless the cotton socks, don't speak Italian. And if you find yourself an agent who doesn't speak, especially if you go to Sicily and Puglia, less agents speak English there. So get yourself someone who speaks English. Also, see if they're registered with AIPP. Liz, we're both, we all know about AIPP, the Association of International Property Professionals. See if the AIPP can advise you on someone in the particular country or area that you want to go and buy from. We all know what AIPP does. It regulates to an extent it can do as professionals, and it sort of says to the client, we're good people, so start off with us.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's good advice. Yeah, and actually you brought up the subject of Puglia, Stefano, and this carries on from this lady obviously listened to our session yesterday. You mentioned there's a lot of corruption in the south. Does this affect buying property, and is it safe to live there? I intend to live there on my own most of the time. Well, I mean, I actually personally know 2 women who live on their own and live very happily in Puglia. But I mean, to me, it seems safe. But what do you guys say, Nathania?
What do you think, Nathania?
Yeah, I think Puglia is okay to live, but you just have to be aware about the things that is happening. That's the but it's not like you cannot live there. We should not exaggerate it. You should just be careful when you buy. Don't buy by yourself, but buy with an agent or a lawyer. Check everything, and then it's okay. And when you live there, also you have to take care to stay. You have to be aware about the things that are happening. I also like to add something at the thing that Stefano was telling about visiting the houses. What we do when people from abroad are not able to come over, of course you should visit the house, but we can also go there and we make video visits. So you could also ask that, and that is a good way to see a house. And also, your agent should have a look at the house anyway. Also to check if the house, in the way it is the same as it is registered in the Cadastral. There are quite some things important to check when you buy a house. Of course, you should check if the owner is really the owner. And for that part, we always, as an agent, we do a quick check. And when everything is okay, it is okay. But as soon as I see there are difficult things, I go on to a lawyer, because you really have to check it out. That is really an important thing, because ownership can go on until the 7th grade in the family in Italy. So you really have to check that out. Then we also have to check if the papers in the Cadastral are the same as the house it is in reality. And most of the times it's not always the case. So we check that. We always go there also with an engineer to do a big check if everything is okay. And then a part that is mostly forgotten is to check all the permissions from the commune, so the urbanistical point of view. And that's also a part that a notary is not obliged to. So I'm also very grateful to the things that Stefano told. The role of the notary is really different. In fact, the notary just checks if the buyer and the seller are okay. Do you agree? Okay, fine with me. And I'm originally Dutch, but I also know that in England it's like that. You trust a notary because then he is checking if everything is okay. But in Italy, that's not the case. So you really need someone to check if the urbanistical point of views are okay, if the cadastral is okay, if the ownership, the property is okay. And we also do a check about the state of the house, the constructional state. And then you know, okay, what is about, what can I expect about renovations? Is it necessary or is it wishfully? Things like that. Another important thing is that the house needs to be according to the rules for construction, but at the time the house is built. And that's also a difference. What I experience, what in Holland and in England is different. When we buy a house and they say, yes, the house is according to the rules of building, I expect it is according to the rules of building today. But in Italy, that's not the case. So depending on the age of a house, the rules are different. And then houses that are built before 1967, at that time, the Cadastral didn't exist in Italy. So all the houses are in conformity just like that. And that is okay, you should know that, but you should also be aware about the surprises you might find when you buy a house. And I'm always advising to really do a good survey. At least you know in advance what you can expect, and then you can make the decision: do I buy or not? And if you buy before and then afterwards you find out, you can find yourself also in an abuse of abuso edilizio, or abuse of construction. And then you really have high costs to fix it. So that are really important things about buying.
This is what, can I just interject a second? This is, as lawyers, this is what we do. We check the planning permissions and all the urbanistic, the story.
We do it as well.
Houses pre-47 don't have a habitation certificate. So when we want a habitation certificate, they'll say to us, well, it's been stood 300 years. I'm sorry, there isn't one. And the planning, you could go from the ridiculous to the sublime, because if there's been, the further south you go, ladies, as you know, the more planning problems occur. And I take it as read that every time I buy a house for a client in Puglia, there is something wrong with the planning. And you can either, what I do is I turn the tables on the vendor and say, look, we want to buy this property. We will only make the contract, we will only purchase the property if the contract is conditional upon your client rectifying the problem. I don't see why my client should spend the money to rectify the problem. And we know that it could be a simple application for some bits and pieces just to be changed in the registers, or it could be something more sinister, which means that they have to go back and apply to have put right on the paperwork and have a permission granted. For example, the swimming pool that was done that shouldn't have been done. Or, as I mentioned yesterday, I had a client last week who's had to, they wouldn't give him retrospective consent and the amnesty. They said, I'm sorry, you've got to cover your swimming pool over and fill it with, we want to see it full of soil and grassed over, and only then will we grant you permission to sell the house and with the planning permission correctly. So you can go from the sublime to the ridiculous. Be careful. You do not want that. And if there is a problem, turn it round onto the vendor.
Okay, exactly. That's really good advice there. Just touching on, we're going to whiz through some other things. I was going to touch on mortgages, which criteria have tightened up across the post-COVID world. But what is the minimum mortgage? Is there a minimum mortgage that Nigel Freeburn asks? And are there lenders? Can anyone give any advice for getting a mortgage in Italy?
Yeah. One of my the people that is working with the company, he is doing the mortgage thing, and we have contacts with 21 banks and institutions. When the funds are enough, because they also check what is your income and what are the costs and things like that, you should consider that you can get a loan up to 50% of the value of the house. And they are not willing to finance the restructural part of it. So you really should have some money from your own. You cannot do a loan for the whole thing. And even that is difficult at the moment, because banks are really, really busy. And last week we have been talking with some banks, they just say, we can't do it. We don't have the capacity. We can't do it. It's not that we decline the client, but we don't have the capacity to do the mortgage. So also that is so it's good to have different banks and institutions to work with. At least you can provide a mortgage.
Yeah, because of this pent-up demand, even in the UK, mortgage providers are struggling with demand at the moment.
Yeah, exactly, because the interest is so low, and and when you buy something nice, it's also a good time to buy.
Yeah,
when you dream about a house, it's really good. Yeah.
Stefano, yesterday you alluded to the fact it's quite tricky for Americans to borrow, and there's a question here actually. What banks are best to use for dual citizens, American and Italian, with American income? Any ideas, either of you?
I've used, in the last month, we've used UBI and UBS.
Right.
So, but I was about to say, when Nathania was saying her bit, that banks in Italy are like banks everywhere else. They have every now and then they have amounts of money to lend, and when that amount of money is lent, they have no more. So the offers that they have disappear. So you really need to have brokers who are on the ball, and you need to. I mean, we have brokers over here that we use. Sometimes for certain countries, I go directly to people like Nathania who have their own member of a brokering team in their own team, because they are so much closer to what's going on. And it's usually the case that when you go to a broker like Nathania or one of Nathania's team, you go through less bureaucracy when you go directly to the country, as opposed to a broker who's in the United Kingdom, who then has to do his own bit with Nathania. So it cuts out another layer of administration. That's what I would advise. Go directly to someone like Nathania, has their own member of the team, and they can deal with it straight away, and they speak English.
Okay, right. Well, we're not going to go through the whole purchase process, because people can very easily find that from you guys direct or online. But we're going to bring up the Brexit question, because there are quite a few questions relating to that. So, I mean, there is theoretically, there's still time to buy a property in Italy before the end of the year, isn't there? Typically, how long is the purchase process, Stefano?
It's about, everything goes right, it's about 12 weeks. If everything goes right. It depends also which part of Italy you're dealing with. The further south you go, the longer it is. There's no doubt about it. You need to have all your ducks lined up in a row. You need to have the right people in the transaction. You need to have a proactive agent, a proactive lawyer, and someone, usually, many people have friends on the ground who actually look after things for them along the way. They pop in, someone's bought in the village, and they pop into the agent and say, look, what's going on, and they keep the thing moving. So that's what I would advise. Someone who speaks English, someone who speaks Italian, both as a lawyer, both as an agent, who can chivvy things along for you.
Okay, and on the same subject, I think the answer is we don't quite know this one, but you can confirm. Sadiq Khan asked, post-Brexit, will UK citizens who are purchasing property have any rights to live and work in Italy? Well, I presume they will, but it might just be a little bit more difficult, the hoops to go through. Well,
I think the administration will be bigger, will be greater, there'll be more paperwork. I have to say that of all the European countries, I think the one that's going to be worse is France. I don't think Italy is going to impose so much more bureaucracy. The Italians are very user-friendly. Slow, but we are user-friendly but slow. I think the French are the ones that are going to cause the most problems to people.
I would agree with that, just to prop your ongoing taxes, Craig Barnes, Natanya.
Yeah, I saw the question.
Are there any annual property taxes that you need to pay on a house?
Yes, you have to pay the IMU. There is a property tax. On the worth, the value of the house, the taxation value of the house, and that you have to pay every year, and that's it. But another interesting thing about taxes, I just saw a Q&A coming by about the retirement taxes, and there are quite some really interesting taxes in Italy. I don't know if I can say anything about that, Liz.
Oh, there's incentives for retirees in southern Italy. Is that?
Yes, it is.
Low tax regime.
It's not only when you retire.
No.
It is for people who come to Italy and it is valid for the regions from Abruzzo and south, from the middle and then to the south. Then when you do your residency here, in the first 10 years, you have a 7% income tax. And that could be very interesting. And of course, it is interesting for people who are going in a retirement situation, because normally your income gets a little bit lower. But then when you only have to pay 7% income tax, you can remain your standard of living. The standard of living is you can remain it anyhow in England, in Italy, because prices are low and life is good. Then there's another interesting tax that I just want to mention. And it's also not very well known, but it is important for people who have more money. And we call it the millionaire's tax, because you pay
we know about that, yes. The flat tax, yes.
The flat tax, you pay 100,000 euros and then you're done. So when you have a lot of money, it can be really interesting.
Yeah,
it's a good idea to check it.
A lot of people at the moment.
Yes. You should check it out anyhow. We have also contacts with tax specialists, so we can really help for your situation. It's really interested to do that.
I'm not quite important. In that bracket, but anyone listening might be. On the tax subject, Stefano, Sarah Hubbard asks, we've been informed that taxes are based on the cadastral value rather than the buying price, which differs from the advice you've just given.
Right. In 2006, up until 2006, people were using all sorts of values and not declaring, like they were doing in Spain, and there were payments that were not being declared and going under the table. So the government in 2006 passed a new law which said, in essence, that you can either use the full payment value. So if you're buying a property for €1 million, you can either declare €1 million, which of course will give rise to a higher taxation, the equivalent of stamp duty, or you can use the cadastral value. And the cadastral value is not the same as, but as a rule of thumb, it's somewhere in the region of our rateable value in the United Kingdom. So that's what it means. You can use either. Of course, if you're buying, for example, I'm buying client property in Cadastral in Lucca, they're paying 1.3 million, but they're actually paying it on the cadastral value, which is 65,000 euros, would you believe? So of course they've chosen 65,000 euros. And that's what you do. It is not illegal, and it was passed through. It's the, what's it called, the Legge Bersani, what was it called, the 2006 from Nathania. So it was the then Chancellor of the Exchequer who said, look, we've had enough of this, let's make it legal. In essence, what they've done is they've legalized the lower value, and you can pay either or both. There is just one thing, although capital gains tax isn't such a great issue in Italy, if you think about it, if you pay the cadastral value of, let's say, 65,000 as opposed to $1 million, then of course you create an artificial gain from day one. So you've got to be careful of that. And there is no, as long as you hold your property, it keeps changing, but as long as you hold your property in Italy for at least 5 years, then there's no capital gains tax to pay. But if you were to sell it in that period, there could very well be a capital gains tax element if the property wasn't your main or only residence.
Exactly.
And also if you don't reinvest the money within Europe within, I think it's either 18 or 24 months. So be careful of that. But most people intelligently would use the cadastral value, but you've got to be aware of the fact that it could create you an artificial paper gain.
Okay, that's great advice. And just if you get a mortgage, I mean, being a cash buyer is generally speeds the process. It makes you more attractive to a vendor. Absolutely. But does it cost more in terms of does it add to your purchase costs? You know, mortgage arrangement fees, etc.
Yeah,
would that add to the 14% or whatever?
It does, because when you buy a property in Italy, as with Spain and France, if you take a mortgage out, then there is a registration fee to pay for the registration of the mortgage at the land registry, the Cadastral. There is also an increased notaio fee, notaire, whatever. They all take a percentage. They all calculate a fee on the basis of a percentage of what the loan is to be registered at the Cadastral. So yes, registration fees, notaio fees. Anything else I've missed, Nathania? I think that's
Yeah,
those are
the
the two.
fees, not especially for the loans.
But yes, certainly if you've got your own money, use it. There are
Yeah,
pros and cons out there. People always say if you can get a loan, because then you're using somebody else's money. If you can't get a loan,
it's
however,
about liquidity.
then
Yes.
yeah, that's right. Use your own.
You should really look your situation. Can be very
Okay.
personal.
Thank you. And if just another question, if you happen to buy a holiday home, you think it's going to be a holiday home initially, and then you actually decide you love Italy so much you want to live there full
Yeah.
time, can you get the difference between the taxes back? Asks Tom Woolley.
As
Yes.
long as it's done within the first 18 months. I've never come across this. I've read this. I think it's quite interesting. I would think that as long as you go back to the notaio within the 18-month period, then you might end up having to pay some more notarial and registration fees because he has to do some admin work, prepare another deed, or do an addendum to the deed, to the rogito, the document, the conveyance, and also re-register some registration tax. I would have thought yes. I don't know what you think, Nathaniel. What do you think?
Yes, you can do that. But when people are doubting, we always advise to register as a prime house because you pay the lower fee.
Yeah.
And then within 18 months, if you do not want to come over, you can always pay the extra amount.
Yeah.
It is easier to pay an extra amount in 18 months than to go to all the processes to get your money back.
Yeah,
it's just
cheaper.
like that.
Probably cheaper.
Do you think the Italian authorities bother checking up how much you're using your house?
Yes, they do.
Yes,
they absolutely do.
Yes.
Because when you register your house as a resident, they come to check it within, I think, 6 weeks.
Yep.
But it's also a strange thing about that. If you're not at home, they leave a note, and you have to go to the city hall within a certain period of 2 or 3 weeks to say, hey, I'm here, I found it. But there has been some cases here around that houses were sold or bought or rented out, also renting out, to people who stay there 1 or 2 days, and then it was used as in a kind of illegal way. And then they checked really, do you live there? Is there a toothbrush? Are there clothes? But as long as you use it in a normal way, you can register it. You can go to the city hall to say, hey, I'm here. Also when you're not exactly there at that moment, because you can also go to the supermarket and not be at home at the moment they check. So that is not a big issue, but you should not use your home as a,
The worst case scenario is that if you declare that you're going to have a prima casa and pay the 2% as opposed to the 9%, the Guardia di Finanza will come round. I have had a client who's been threatened with arrest and imprisonment not because he wanted to, he was always somewhere else, and he didn't do what he should have done, despite the advice. So the Guardia di Finanza and the local police will come round to your house, and they will only take so much. Long gone are the days where you could say, Italy, oh yes, you can brush it under the table and it'll disappear and it'll never be seen again.
Okay, right. Well, we've got to whiz through and touch on the subject of residency because time is running out. I'm going to conflate two questions. What do British people need to get residency in terms of income in the bank, and do you physically have to be present in Italy to apply for residency, or can it be applied to from the UK? Stefano.
As far as I understand it, it's always been the case, unless it's changed in the last day or so. I don't know where we are at the moment. To claim residency in any country, you have to be physically present. So you would go there for the 90-day period, and within that first 90-day period, you would apply for residency if it's your intention to stay there for any on a permanent basis, whether you're renting. I mean, remember that you don't have to buy a house. You can rent a house, and I would always say, if you're moving out permanently, never buy a house first of all. Rent a house for 6 months, 12 months, and even if the house you're renting is one you want to buy, you've got to have an agreement with the landlord that says that any rent you pay will come off the purchase price. So therefore, it's a win-win. It's not lost money. It's a win-win situation. But the answer to your question is, you have to be there physically. You have to go in person, and you have to apply for residency and jump through a whole lot of hoops. You have to go to the police station, to the local authority, and all sorts of other bits and pieces, and prove that you are there, and it is your intention to stay there on a permanent basis.
How long does that process take typically if someone buys in, if someone decides in December? You know, I mean, how long are they going to get residency by the end of, you know, in 2 or 3 weeks, or is it going to take 3 months?
No, it's, sorry, can I answer?
Yeah.
What we always do in the case of of a rental contract, you do the rental contract, and at the same day we go to the commune, to the city hall, to register for the residency. From that moment on, your residency is registered. Only it has to be checked and to be confirmed within, I think, 3 weeks or something. But it is already done in that moment. So you get a certificate that you applied, and in fact it is okay. So you can use it also when you needed to get your stuff over for shipment, things like that. So it can really be very fast. And then the bureaucracy goes on and you get the confirmation later, things like that. But it's not a big problem.
Okay, and on the subject of rent, someone's listening to you about the rental contract. How long does the rental contract have to be if you're applying for residency, if you're using it as your permanent address?
Minimum 6 months.
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Minimum 6. It has to be a minimum 6 months.
6 months.
You have to be able to. Yeah. The other thing. Go on, Nathaniel. Go on.
Yeah, you have, the normal thing is 4 years plus 4 years, but there is a special contract for a temporary stay, but that is not okay for registering the residence. So what we do, we always do a 4-year contract, which can be renewed with another 4 years, but we sign the disdetta, the letter that is saying both the rent, the owner and the one who is renting. When you sign that in the beginning, you can agree about every period you want, but you should organize it in a good way, and that's the way we use. Because if we use a 6-month contract and then you have to renew it, you get a casino at the administration, and it is more quiet, more easy, more smooth, just to do the 4x4 contract and to sign the cancellation agreement just at the start of the contract. And it is valid, only you leave the date of cancellation, you leave it, open.
Just be careful on that though. I mentioned the 6 months purposely because a 4+4 gives rights to the tenant that the landlord may not actually want. And even if you sign the disdetta, there is case law to prove that the tenant can still claim rights even though there's been a disdetta, because by law you can't abridge the 4+4. The other thing to say is that when an English person or any other person goes for residency, they have to prove that they can maintain themselves, which means money in capital in the bank and also earning capacity, and also medical insurance. So you have to prove that you're not going to be a burden on the state, that you have your, I will always say to people, if you've got an insurance policy, medical insurance policy, make it an international one like people like Bupa, AXA, Zurich or whoever else. You've got to prove that you can maintain yourself initially during that period. If you then start working in Italy and contributing to the state like any other country, up to the 31st of December, of course, it may change, then of course you will be entitled to a certain amount of free medical insurance because you're contributing into the state funds and therefore you get something back out. But if you don't contribute, you're a retiree, you have to have your own policy.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I mean, we're running out of time, but in healthcare, I mean, you have to, some people take private but once you're paying into the system, you can access the national healthcare, can you, in Italy? Yeah, okay. Just on the subject of obviously rental is a popular subject. People have to be careful if they're renting a holiday home with a view to getting residency. I mean, it has to be in their, do they have to have bills and a contract in their name rather than just being a sort of a holiday Airbnb or whatever?
Yeah, that is not possible, because when you have an Airbnb or a holiday home, the owner can only rent it out for maximum 4 weeks. So if you want to use it as a stay to do the house hunting and to prepare for a longer stay in Italy, better do a rental of a house that is just a house, not a holiday home.
Sure.
That's
Okay.
easier. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Two more quick ones. If I buy a holiday home in Italy, which of course, you know, you're going to be perfectly fine to do even after Brexit, should I have an Italian will for that property, Stefano?
It depends which country you come from. If you're a European citizen, since 2015, there's a European regulation called European Succession Treaty, which is Regulation 650 of 2012, which says that any European Union citizen can choose the law which will affect their estate upon their death. There are only 3 countries within Europe that you can only use it partly for, and those countries, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands and Denmark, who say that you cannot use a foreign law to dictate how your property in your own home country will go at your death. So for example, if a UK citizen has a property in Italy, they can make and they become resident, for example, in Italy, but they are British, then they can use English law to dictate how their property abroad and property anywhere else in the world will go when they die, and they're not forced to use Italian civil law, the Napoleonic Code. There are 2 things you have to prove. One thing you have to prove out of 2, a connection, which is either habitual residence, which means your permanent place of residence, or your nationality.
Okay, so just to recap on you whizzed through, Stefano, the residency criteria. You mentioned money in the bank, you mentioned healthcare insurance, permanent address, bank account. Is there anything else?
Codice fiscale, bank account.
Yes. Right, brilliant. Okay, great. And this is a question relating to wealth tax. I think it depends, I suppose, whether you're where you're tax resident as well. I don't know. Is it correct that if you are resident in Italy and own a property in the UK, you will be there will be a wealth tax based on your UK property value?
Well, if you're an Italian citizen and you own property abroad, the Italians are subject to a tax which is called IVIE, I-V-I-E, which is 0.75% of the asset which is abroad. So as far as Italians are concerned, they do have a form of wealth tax. It's not as punitive as France, where anything above 1.3 million you get taxed on, all the rest of it. But yes, it still exists if you're Italian. And remember that if you become resident for tax purposes in Italy, notwithstanding the fact you're a UK citizen, you will also become obliged to pay that IVIE, I-V-I-E, which is 0.75% of your assets abroad. Okay.
And the income necessary, does it, in Spain it varies by region, but what is the minimum income you need to have showing going into your bank, or money in the bank for residency, Stefano?
Isn't it about, Nathaniel, isn't it about €2,500 a month, something like that? 2,500, 600, something like that.
Yeah, it also depends if you're alone or if you have a family.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of people asking you about that at the moment, Nathania, because they want time? Oh no.
Actually, no. No.
Okay.
I know there are different rules for it, but normally with our clients, it's not a problem. So actually, it has never been an issue. So
there was one.
I know they. Sorry?
There was one question, Liz, that was related to this. One guy said, can they use rental income in Italy? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure. Do you know that, Nathania?
If you can use rental income?
Rental income as part of your monthly
income.
Source,
yes, of course.
Right, okay.
It is important that you can say, this is my monthly income, so I can support myself.
Right.
That's the whole issue.
And do you just an admin thing? Do you, if you have an Italian property, do you have to submit a tax return, whether you rent it out or not, every year?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So that's
and in that case, there are different possibilities to do that. When you have a house, and it also depends on the regions. There are regions where they say you have a house, you want to rent out certain rooms, like a type of bed and breakfast, but bed and breakfast is another rule and another system. But when you have a house, you just want to rent out some rooms in some rooms. In some regions, you can rent out 3 rooms, in other regions 4, and you can just do that without adding IVA, that is the value added tax. and that's okay, you can do that. But if you want to open an agriturismo, it's another thing. If you want to open a bed and breakfast, it's another thing. If you want to use a country house, it's another thing. So, and there are also all types of other forms, like when you buy something agrarical, you can also just have your agenda agricolo, and then also renting out rooms. So I always am surprised that people come over, I want an agriturismo, and it's very popular, or I want a B&B. Okay, but when we look deeper, what do you want? You can also choose other forms. So we also assist with that. What is your situation? What do you want? What is the house? What possibilities do they have? And also, I forgot to mention, there are a lot of subsidiaries in this moment in Italy, in all the regions, about facilitating, starting touristical events, starting touristical places. When you want to open your bed and breakfast, when you want to do something with agriturismo, there are a lot of subsidiaries. Also,
Incentive. Yeah.
Subsidies.
Yes.
Subsidies, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Also, for restructuring, in fact, there is a rule. If you are a tax resident here, and you do a restructuring, depending on the type of restructuring, you can get back 110%. It is called a super bonus.
The eco bonus.
You should be aware of it and have a check what kind of renovation activities can be put in that rule and what not. But it is a really good thing to buy a house for a cheap price, to do a restructuring and not pay for it. You just get it back. It has possibilities. I'm not saying it always works its way, but you should check it out. It could be very interesting.
But it's an incentive to get British people to go and buy those beautiful, slightly, houses that need attention in Italy, and that's the dream. And that's what people just need to go in with their eyes open. And people speak to experts such as you about the actual practicalities and expertise of doing those projects. And as a final note, someone comments, it sounds like you need a very good Italian accountant to navigate the tax system. So I suppose that might be advisable, mightn't it? To
commercialista. You
need one.
Commercialista.
Yeah. You cannot do without.
One thing on agriturismi, you need something called a YAP, an IAP, to be an agriturismo, and English people can't be YAPs. It has to be in Italian, so it's usually an Italian agricultore, farmer, who will take on that responsibility, but he also needs to have shares in the company that you set up. So be careful, you're giving away ownership of part of the company to a YAP. So you need to be able to trust the person. So be careful, as Nathaniel says, there are lots and lots of things you can do, but you need to identify clearly how to do it and when to do it.
Exactly. And also the way to get that, to be a YAP, most people are scared about, oh, but then I have to do that and that and that. But also when you have English certificates or licenses, you can transfer it. And also there are very easy licenses to get here in Italy that are also applying to be a YAP. So also it is a way that you should not put aside. It could be very interesting. And it's not too difficult to do that. Brilliant. But it has more effort. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, we've managed to, we've run out of time, we've gone over a bit, but there's just so many facets that to get your head around if you're approaching buying and living in Italy. I'm sure, it's very much worth all the getting to understand the process. So thank you to the panel. But you can book one-to-one sessions with them, get in contact with them after this session. There are Zoom sessions through our website you can book for another couple of months at least. But their contact details will be on the bottom of this recording. You can listen to it again another time if you didn't catch any of that. So, do get in contact with us. There's a very good guide to buying in Italy on aplaceinthesun.com. We've got some more TV episodes coming up. Jasmine's in Puglia this week as we speak, so look out for that. And thank you to my panel. I hope it's been a very useful session for anyone listening. Thank you, Stefano and Nathania.
And we are available for questions. When there are questions, because the Q&As, I've seen it coming through, we were not able to answer, but please send it to her personally, and we are very happy to answer it to you.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, both. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.